Okay, so this is the building of the, as you see here, um, ultrasonic ranging alarm kit. Honestly, there's not really that much instructions. There's a schematic if you know how to read the schematics, and then there's a list of parts and it tells you where it goes. So there's not really an image, but when you purchase it, you can find an image, so you can use that always. Um, so basically, what it is a system that works pretty much like sonar. It senses a distance through two sensors, which are right here. Um, and once it senses that distance, um, it triggers an alarm. When it's not within that distance, it'll be silent. When it's within that distance, it'll trigger an alarm. Um, and Before I begin, I would like to start by saying one, this is all my stuff. I'm obviously doing this from home. I chose to do it this way because it's hard for me to make it to class. If you choose to do it this way, it's not that expensive. About 50 to 60 bucks can get you everything: your solder, your soldering iron, even the tools that come with the soldering iron. I gotta find my. Here it is. There's a whole kit that you'll get with the soldering iron. These helping hands with the solid metal base, so it's not going to be sliding around or it's pretty heavy. Um, but yeah, so that's the first thing I wanted to say. Let me adjust the camera a bit. And the second thing I wanted to say is, if you realize this soldering plate has very small. Let's let this adjust. Um, so it has very small metal plates where the solder goes. So I recommend, if you're going to choose to do this when you have a lot of practice with the soldering, because uh, it's just smaller than usual. Also, I will say, um, I bought a very thin solder for that exact same reason. Again, because I bought everything. Like I said, I bought everything um, so that I can do it from home. And I'm using a 0.6 millimeter solder. There's even thinner. I recommend you use thin solder if you're going to use this board. Just remember that the thinner it is, the more you have to apply. So like I was saying, this is the parts board, the parts list. I would go start with your resistors. That's always the biggest part of the project, and then do the rest. And again, these come separated in so these come separated in groups. That makes it a little easier to tell which one is which. One is supposed to have 9 pieces, the other one's supposed to have 7. So the one with 9, you know, they go where they go, and the one with 6, you know, they go where they go. It's supposed to be 8 and 6, but they gave you one spare one just in case per resistor. Before I begin soldering, I wanted to mention that as you see, this comes with a little sponge. I'm just like, that looks too flimsy and it doesn't really hold, because the thing is like, there's no edges really. So I just took an old rag that I don't care about and I wet it. And I'm using that as my solder cleaner, because it's just easier in my opinion. Um, so yeah, that's just my opinion. You'll know you soldered right when you go to move the wire and it doesn't come off. It literally just bends up, because that's how you're going to clip them now. Um, One thing I would like to say is those little metal plates on this board are glued on, obviously. So don't hold your soldering iron on there too long. Don't be afraid either, but don't hold it there too long, because if that metal plate comes off, you just basically took off the connection to the board. So. Okay, so I did have to reset the camera, and I realized that a lot of my soldering, I don't know how much of it, probably all of it, didn't even come out because it was to the edge of the video. Sorry about that. Honestly, there's nothing else I could really do, but I got pretty much most of it done. I just got the number system in, and make sure you line up the little notch on the ICU. I don't know if you see it. The little notch on it to the notch in the drawing, which is this way to the capacitor. All right, so basically, the capacitor wasn't letting this in. So I'm praying to God this didn't mess it up, but I just cut off the new part, knowing that that's the part that I need to put towards the capacitor to make it fit. So now that I put it in, voila, it fits. I just pray to God I didn't mess it up. So like I was saying, be very careful. This is probably one of the hardest ones because the 4 pins are like literally right next to each other, and the last 4 actually just almost made a connection. All I did was use my little pincer, I don't know what you would call this, tweezer, whatever you call it, and I used the sharp end, which is very thin, which is why you need something really small. Needle nose plier, there you go. And I heated up the solder, and I literally just cut the connection, and then I took off everything, and hopefully it works fine. I'm gonna decide not to cut the pins until I know whether or not it works for that one, because I know that I accidentally made those 2 connections make contact. So I moved the iron out the way and moved this out the way. One important note: as soon as you're done using the iron, I really recommend you turn it off because it's very dangerous. I've already burned myself. I've burned a hole through the gloves. Just be very careful. It's very hot. It can go very hot. This one particularly is set to Celsius, so you just have to convert the Celsius to Fahrenheit. Be very careful because you don't want to go too high. The device itself lets you know that even though it can go that high, you shouldn't keep it that high for long periods of time. And anyways, in class, we were told anywhere between 525 and 570 in Fahrenheit is good enough, and that's about between 270 and 290 Celsius, I believe, somewhere like that. So I keep it around there, and that keeps it in those green numbers, which means you're okay to stay on longer periods of time. So that's definitely a recommendation. I've been turned it off. You see, I can now touch it. It's off completely. I'm always safe about it. You see, so you can now move this out the way. And I just want to show you. So the 3 clickers I figured out. I don't think the order would have mattered because it has to do with the port, with the location itself, S2, S3, and S4. And you can still specifically see the S2, S3, S4, and I guess that's on purpose. You can see here a schematic real quick before I show you exactly how it works. But basically how it's supposed to work. So it transmits something, detects an object, sends it back to the receiver. It detects it, and then depending on the timer, it'll either not or it will or it will not trigger the alarm. The time in which this took to send and come back, that's how it knows how far the things are. So that little blue button there is the power button. I'm gonna go ahead and bring it up to the camera, and you will see here that I have it connected to a power source right there with my white Apple brick. All it needs is 5 watts of power. I believe the Apple brick is exactly 5 watts. Safer to use something that's exactly the wattage you need. And you will see here that there's 3 little dots. That's the way your numbers are going to face. So I'm facing opposite of it so you guys can see better. I'm actually going to bring it higher because I can see here. And I've set it to a very low distance for it to trigger so that I can actually show this. So as you see there, it'll turn on. It'll eventually set a distance. So you see right now it's at 22.22. I believe this is meters because everything on this is set to I believe this is meters. So as you see, it'll go ahead and send something, and this is how you set it. So you hit the button, and right now it's set to 0.05. You can go up or down depending on this. This is down, this is up. So if I set it to 22, you see it'll trigger because that's how far it is from me. 0.22 of a meter, I believe. But if I bring it back down, it won't trigger. So once you have a distance, I want to set it low because when I'm you doing the demonstration, I don't want it to trigger without me explaining. So I'm gonna set it to 0.04. Press that button to set, and there you go. Again, as you see, I could get pretty close. As you see, I don't know if you can see my hand. Okay, there you can see my hand. So 0.6, 0.5, and then 0.4, boom, 0.3. All right, so it's just a nice little project. It's cool. It's same way door alarms and stuff work. It's the same way, kind of. It's a transmitter and a receiver, and yeah. Few pointers, like I said, thin solder helps. Be very patient. This project will take you anywhere between 2 to 4 hours, depending on if you have to. For example, it took me about 4 hours, but because I kept having to stop to unload the footage, to reload it, to clear the memory, to then start recording again, and all this stuff. So it took me longer. But be very careful on how you solder. As I will show you, I will disconnect the power so nothing happens. These joints, these solder points are very small, so you want to be very careful. I can now clip these three. Sorry, I just realized I wasn't really in frame. I can now clip these three because now I know it works. But be very careful. Be very careful on how you solder all these, all right? So yeah, good luck and enjoy your project.